The CEO of Wellington International has just been fired after a battery complaint. And this is just not another controversy. This could be a turning point for equestrian sport. Because when leadership at the very top of one of the most powerful equestrian organizations in the world collapses this quickly, it forces a question that the industry has been avoiding for years. Is this real accountability or just damage control? Wellington, Florida is often described as the center of elite equestrian sports in the United States. Every winter, it becomes a global stage where top riders, Olympic veterans, and rising stars compete in front of sponsors, investors, and international audiences. It is polished, prestigious, and incredibly influential. But moments like this reveal something deeper. They reveal what happens when that image is challenged. Wellington International recently announced that its CEO, Murray Kessler, had been terminated effective immediately. The decision followed a battery complaint filed by an employee after an alleged incident that took place in February. Now, if you did not see my previous video, it is important to understand exactly what has been reported so far. The complaint involved alleged inappropriate physical contact during a public setting, specifically within a VIP environment. There were reportedly witnesses present, and the situation was serious enough to result in a police report being filed. At the same time, Wellington International launched an internal investigation into the matter. Kessler has denied the allegations, and at this point, no criminal charges have been filed. That is an important distinction, because legal outcomes and organizational decisions do not always align. However, even without criminal charges, the consequences have already been significant. On March 27th, Wellington International announced that Kessler had been terminated from all leadership roles, including his position as CEO of Equestrian Sports Production. The organization stated that an independent investigation had been launched within 24 hours of the complaint, and that their decision reflects a commitment to maintaining the highest standards of professional conduct. At first glance, this appears to be a decisive response, but the reaction from the equestrian world has been far more complicated. Some people see this as a clear example of accountability at the highest level of the sport. They believe it shows that even individuals in positions of power are not immune to consequences. Others are more skeptical. They question whether the response was truly immediate, or whether it only accelerated once the situation became public. They ask whether similar cases in the past have been handled the same way, or whether the situation is different because of the level of visibility it received. And those questions point to something much bigger than this one incident. They point to systemic issues within equestrian sport, because equestrian sport does not operate like most other professional sports. It is built on a network of private ownership, financial influence, long-standing relationships, and reputation. Power is often concentrated among a relatively small number of individuals who operate across multiple roles as riders, trainers, business leaders, and decision makers. Within that structure, accountability has not always been consistent. For years, there have been ongoing concerns about how misconduct is handled, particularly when it involves individuals with influence. There have been questions about whether complaints are taken seriously, whether investigations are transparent, and whether consequences are applied equally across the board. And these concerns are not limited to human behavior. They extend to horse welfare, training practices, and judging standards. The debate around roll curve, for example, has existed for years. Despite criticism from veterinarians and welfare advocates, the practice has continued to appear in high-level competition. That has led many people to question whether rules are enforced consistently or whether success and reputation can influence outcomes. Similarly, recent controversies involving high-profile trainers and riders have raised concerns about accountability. Allegations of horse abuse, questionable training methods, and ethical violations have sparked public outrage. But the response to those situations have varied, creating a perception that the system does not always operate transparently. When you place the Wellington situation into that broader context, it starts to look less like an isolated incident and more like part of a larger problem. It highlights a tension that has existed in equestrian sport for a long time. The tension between image and reality. On one hand, the sport presents itself as disciplined, respectful, and rooted in tradition. On the other hand, it faces ongoing challenges related to governance, transparency, and the use of power. The sudden removal of a CEO at this level disrupts that balance. It brings the internal issues into public view and forces the industry to confront questions that are often avoided. At the same time, it is important to recognize that organizations operate under complex restraints. They must consider legal risks, protect their reputations, and maintain relationships with sponsors and stakeholders. However, complexity does not remove responsibility. If anything, it increases it. Because the higher the level of influence, the higher the expectation for accountability. Following Kessler's termination, Wellington International appointed Michael Stone to oversee operations. Stone has long-standing experience within the organization and connections to national and international equestrian governance. From a business perspective, this provides stability. But stability is not the same as trust, and trust is what is at stake right now. Trust is built through consistent actions over time. It requires transparency, fairness, and a willingness to address difficult issues directly. For many people within the equestrian community, this situation raises important questions about whether those qualities are truly present. It also raises questions about the future, because this moment does not exist in isolation. It is happening at a time when equestrian sport is already under increasing scrutiny. Public awareness of horse welfare is growing. Discussions about training practices are becoming more visible, and expectations for ethical behavior both toward horses and toward people are evolving. This means that situations like this carry more weight than they might have in the past. They are not just internal matters, they are public signals. Signals about what the sport stands for, signals about what behavior is acceptable, and signals about whether meaningful change is actually happening. So now, the equestrian world is watching how Wellington International moves forward, watching whether there is greater transparency in how situations like this are handled, watching whether this leads to broader conversations about accountability across the sport. Because ultimately, this is not just about one individual. It is about a system that is being tested, a system that is being questioned, and a system that may be approaching a point where change is no longer optional. So the question is not just what happened. The question is what happens next. Will this moment lead to real lasting change? Or will become another example of a situation that forced a response, but did not fundamentally alter the way the sport operates? That is something we do not know yet, but is something that will become clear over time. So now I want to hear from you. Do you believe this decision reflects real accountability? Do you think it represents meaningful progress, or do you see it as a reaction to public pressure? And more broadly, do you feel that equestrian sport is moving in the right direction when it comes to transparency and responsibility? Or do you believe that deeper systemic changes are still needed? Let me know your thoughts, because these conversations matter. And moments like this do not just define headlines. They define the future of the sport.